And from the top of West Mountain in Scranton, Pennsylvania, good morning, everybody. This is 94.3 FM The Talk. Sanity Check, Libertarian Lou, Tea Party Mike. Boy, we got a full studio here today. We got Frank Sorick in studio, John DiLiberto. We got Kerry Schimmelfig from Veterans Alliance. We got X on the line. We got Mike. We got a full house here, Frank. So listen, if you want to start your weekend off right, you want to blow off a little steam, you can give us a call at 888-577-4487. That's 888-577-4487. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Lou. I'm just sitting here in Texas, and the same thing's in Pennsylvania. Washington never seems to change, and I guess that's part of our goals and our inspiration to continue to do what we're doing. But I don't know if anybody there got to see Phil Robertson speak at CPAC, and if anybody doesn't know who he is, he's the matriarch of Duck Dynasty. But it was rather interesting. I found him to probably in his camo make more sense than any of the Washington, $1,500 suits speaking up there, Lou. So I think Phil Robertson might be my pick for president.
Well, one of the ones is actually going to be Bush, who it seems as though Fox News certainly gave him enough coverage, that's for sure. But we got X coming on in our second segment here, as always, and he's been down at CPAC, so we're going to get some interesting views on what's happening at CPAC here in a little bit. Michael, this past week, what happened was a Kurt Shotko, who calls this show and many other shows, and for those who are not familiar with Kurt, he's been around for a long time. He's very active within our community, very well spoken, and while we agree on many issues, there are many issues that we don't agree on. So it was about 2 weeks ago he had called, and he said he was having a conversation with his dad about the FCC and regulating the internet and all those things. And as the conversation went on, it got a little heated, which is okay in a good way. Mm-hmm. And we were going back and forth and all those things. So he called me during the week, this past week, and we got into another conversation. And what came up was something he had said. And Kurt, if you're listening, good stuff. But what he brought out was critical thinking is nothing more than suspension of judgment. I don't know if that's the exact quote, Frank, but we got to talking about that and critical thinking and what really is critical thinking. We all like to think that we're critical thinkers, that we are really thinkers, and with the FCC and certainly if you're getting your news from Newsmax or Rush or some of the conservative talk shows that you're hearing right off the bat that the internet is now being regulated by the government. We're losing the internet, and one of the concerns that we wanted to talk about, or certainly I find interesting talking about, is, are we really looking into this? Because I have a lot of questions about it still. I know Frank.
Does Al Gore know about this?
There you go. Anybody that's listened to the show,
someone wants to regulate his invention. I'm floored.
No, but this is where I'm
a little too busy in Pennsylvania getting the temperatures to find out why that global warming thing is no longer effective. So you have to give the man a break.
Michael, that was exactly what I was thinking about with critical thinking. It's anybody that's listened to the show over the course of the going on now 4 years knows that we have a little bit of mistrust with the government sticking their nose into anything. So right off the bat, but going back to this critical thinking, Kurt, what he has more concern with big business than big government. Not that he's a big government type guy, but once again, I have to start thinking, who do I trust more? Do I trust our government or do I trust Comcast? Comcast, big government, crony capitalism. So my whole point is that, when we really start talking about critical thinking, and it certainly goes to whether it's the FCC, Mike, whether it goes to global warming, certainly 9/11. And I do want to just throw that out there on Saturday, March 21st at the Four Points in Sheridan. Richard Gage, who is part of the Architects and Engineers, will be doing a presentation on what they feel as though what happened in 9/11. I'm actually going to be the MC for that. And the point is that, are we willing to suspend judgment and really do critical thinking on things. And I think sometimes that's a little scary for folks. So I'm going to throw that out to both you and Frank and get your words of wisdom on that today.
Well, Frank, I've been telling my kids probably for a couple of years now that there is no more critical thinking, that it certainly isn't taught in school. We so easily as a society decide to accept whatever we hear on the news or see on the news. So critical thinking is important. As a matter of fact, I can remember my wife and I, probably a year or so ago, listening to some of our favorite talk shows, and maybe even Glenn Beck, and she was so willing to accept what he was saying. And I said, just because you have some similarities doesn't mean that you have to agree with everything you do. When I heard about you and Kurt saying big business versus big government, I stop and think it's all the same. So I think we have lots that we can do in this nation to step back and say, what is it that government is doing? Why are they doing it? And ask the tough questions of who is doing it. And those are part of the things that I try to take a look at before I make judgment.
Frank, you're smiling over here.
As I sit here, knowing what I know about the average person out there, I think there is no critical thinking. And those that are...
and it gets scary.
Right. Those that are critical thinkers would be the 1% of folks who actually pay attention to what's going on, who get their news from more than one source, who the people who truly do not listen to a word we say, who do their own research. Those are the critical thinkers. But unfortunately, even those right now listening to this radio show, there's probably 2 of them out there. And that it's as sad as that sounds. Most folks get their news source from either one source. They pick up the paper, or they look on CNN.com, and that's it. That's what they know.
Brian Williams.
Yeah, exactly. Whatever Brian Williams has told you is
Or
gospel.
Rush,
I mean, why would he lie again?
Right.
He's already been caught with his pants down once. He's not going to do that again. That's for sure, right?
So it is, and Mike, it's when you challenge your own self sometimes and say, well, wait a minute. I mean, why am I believing it? I mean, X brings this up all the time. How many times have we been lied to by our government officials, by government, by all these other things? And then all of a sudden, when sometimes it's hard to do. Right. I mean, talking about the whole 9/11, I'm not sure. I don't know exactly what happened, didn't happen, why it happened, who was involved, and all those other things. And I know a lot of people feel very strongly about it on both sides. But certainly, I am not afraid to say, listen, I want to hear all sides. I want to find out. I'm searching for the truth. And that's one of the things. And I do want to just point that out once again. Saturday, March 21st, at the 4 Points at Sheridan, and right here in Scranton, Pennsylvania, Richard Gage will be doing a dynamic live multimedia presentation. And then following up on Sunday, he'll be at the Sanctuary Church in Newfoundland. So the point is that, are we willing? Or are the folks out there willing? Or are you a listener listening? Are you willing to challenge yourself in some of the beliefs that, or the things that we thought was the truth is really the truth?
Well, we don't know. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, are you open-minded enough to come to sit through the presentation and to ask the questions?
That's it, and ask the questions.
Yeah,
challenge.
Exactly. I mean, nobody's saying that you have to believe everything that's in this presentation, that you're going to be brainwashed right there into believing that 9/11 was a hoax and that this, what you were told or what you believed happened couldn't possibly have been the truth, and now this is the truth. And nobody's saying that. But are you open-minded enough to hear both sides and make your own educated decision? The critical thinkers out there.
Michael, it goes to so many other issues also. You talk about global warming. I remember, I think we spoke about this maybe a year or 2 ago when, one of the times I had visited up in Alaska, Mendenhall Glacier, and I remember I was jumping.
Gone, right? It's melted.
Well, it was
barely enough ice for a martini.
But that wasn't the point. Michael, remember I kind of pointed out, all these folks were coming off the cruise ships, and with my dad, and mostly seniors and all those other things. And this slickster was out there. He was in his Dockers. He looked real sharp and all those other things, and he's getting people to sign petitions to stop Alaskans from logging, saying that if we continue to log, that your grandkids will never see the Glendon Hall Glacier. So, of course, I had to stick my nose into that and say, well, who are you? As it turned out, he was from the Sierra Club. He was from Boston. I said, listen, why? You're from Boston. I said, the most polluted harbor in the world is Boston. Why don't you leave these guys alone to live their stupid lives
They're
up
still
there?
waiting for that tea to clear up.
So, but once again, what's really happening, a lot of times we just regurgitate, all of us sometimes just regurgitate what we hear. And, going back to... critical thinking, I think it's important that we question ourselves sometimes on so many different issues. There's all kinds of things happening out there that we really can't explain. We don't understand why it's happening. But certainly if you watch the news, they'll be more than happy to tell you what's going on. So
just trust them, folks, and they wouldn't lie to you again.
Just trust them. So what's happening in Wilkes-Barre, Frank?
There's a lot happening in Wilkes-Barre. Did you hear?
No. What's happening? Are you running? I heard.
I am.
Officially, you were forced to come out of the closet. So
I was forced into running simply because we cannot trust that an honest person will be elected in the May primary on the Democratic side. We just cannot. So we have to have a candidate running on the Republican ticket for mayor. Otherwise, if we don't do this now, come November, we're stuck with whoever that choice is. Whether it's
competition is good, right?
Exactly, and you can't. Like I said, if there are a lot of good Democrats out there, and God, I hope one of them is selected. So either way, the city gets a great mayor.
Yeah, and from what we understand, well, they're going to. It should be better than what we have now, correct?
Well, I'm convinced it will probably get a bobblehead.
Oh, please, let's not go there. But Michael, we can't really talk about it, but we have some good indications that there might be some major changes coming up there, right, Frank? And we'll leave it like that.
Yeah, I'm hearing rumors that there are some shakeups in the works for Wilkes-Barre. So hold on to your seats, Wilkes-Barre. What you've been praying for a long time is headed your way. That's what
we're hearing. What we're hearing. What else is happening in the town of Wilkes-Barre, there, Frank?
Well, there's a lot happening in the town of Wilkes-Barre, Lou, but
or the city, the metropolis.
The metropolis.
Our
Walmart caught fire last night. That was a terrible mess. I mean, Wilkes-Barre without a Walmart for an hour, what could you do?
One of the things that has been coming up and talking with John DiLiberto when he goes out and he throws the papers and all that stuff, it seems as though that there's an awful lot of empty houses there. I mean, I've been, when I was doing it, I noticed that yourself. But Frank, we haven't really touched on this, but we can for a minute or two, and then maybe touch on it a little later in the show.
For those of you who got your news from President Obama and have heard that the housing market is stabilized and headed back up, I have to be the bearer of bad news here and say he obviously hasn't visited Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, or the surrounding areas, because my office is traditionally a foreclosure office out in Glen Lyon, and we're swamped. And we cannot keep up on the amount of foreclosures we're processing.
Mike, last week, I was talking to Frank. I said, God, I haven't heard from me. And he says, Lou, I can't keep up.
Working like a dog.
He said, working like a dog. So I said, well, what's going on? And he says, listen, yesterday, meaning that Friday, you had 10.
I did.
And that right after the show, you were off and doing 9.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a lot. It just keeps coming at you.
Only 2 today, thank God.
Only 2.
Yeah, that's it. Only 2.
It's amazing, huh, Frank? I mean, Michael, it's just...
Today I'm on vacation with only 2.
Well, what's amazing is, as Frank mentioned, is that we're being told, we go back to critical thinking, we're being told that the economy is getting better and the housing is getting better. And, in reality, when you talk to folks in the real world like Frank, we see it's the complete opposite. So you begin to wonder, where can you go to a source that's honest and going to give you the truth? And that's really harder to find today than almost anything else.
And I think one of the other things that are starting to become more to the fore, it's not even people that are just, I would say, can't pay their mortgage. From what I understand, Frank, I mean, there's a lot of people that just being plumb taxed out of their houses, seniors that maybe lost their partner and not getting the other Social Security part of their check or something else like that. And now they can't even, from what you're saying and from what we've been hearing, this is a real problem here.
It is a huge problem. And what's happening is when folks purchased their home 10, 15 years ago. They were put into an escrow account with their bank and they were told, okay, your mortgage is going to be X amount of dollars. And with your taxes and insurance, it's going to be this. Well, as we've seen, runaway governments like the Layton administration, who took a city that was $59 million in debt and turned it into a city that's $110 million in debt and continued to rise. Where does that money come from?
Sounds like we have a politician in house.
I don't know. But where does that money come from? You're obviously, over the course of his 12 years in City Hall, he's raised taxes, almost doubled the city taxes. Well, that impacts your monthly mortgage payment when your escrow account couldn't possibly keep pace. So your mortgage has gone up year after year under these runaway governments. And it's, I'm blaming the mayor, of course, but he's not the only one. Look at county council, look at everyone.
Everywhere you look.
Everywhere you look, people are reaching deeper and deeper into your pocket, and the pockets are empty or just blown clean through, and they're still reaching in. It doesn't matter what they're trying to grab at this point.
And in many cases, it seems like those that were able to enrich themselves off your largesse, they're certainly enriching themselves quite well.
Yeah, the politicians who tell you it's belt tightening time while they take a raise. I can't take it anymore.
Michael, on that note, and we're definitely going to come back to that a little bit, Frank, but we're going to take a break. When we come back, we have X. We want to talk a little bit about CPAC. You're listening to Sanity Check on 94.3 FM The Talker.
Saturday mornings, 94.3 FM The Talker.
This came, by the way, from a caller to my radio show, Jason from Washington, D.C. He's an insider. He's connected inside Washington, and that's the secret buzz going on inside the Beltway. Jason from Washington, D.C. Jason. He's an insider. He's connected inside Washington.
And we're back. 94.3 FM The Talker, Sanity Check, Libertarian Loot, Tea Party Mike. X is on the line. We got Frank in studio here. And if you want to call, you want to blow off that steam, that number here is 888-577-4487, 888-577-4487 for folks that are not maybe aware of what that little intro is, X, is that it went back to being on the radio and doing some interviews down there in Washington, and all of a sudden, I hear on Fox News and Huffington Post about some Jason, insider Jason. Jason's an insider. I'm thinking, wait a minute.
I know Jason.
Is that possibly one of our guys? So, good morning, Mr. X. Do we got X on the line? Good. So you're down in CPAC. You were down in CPAC last night, correct?
Yeah, I went down there for a couple hours the last couple of days. Just the same sort of thing, just wandering around, observing the crowd. I mean, the interesting thing about it is, remember, these are people that are, highly politically motivated. I mean, obviously it's the average person, 95% of the population, they're going about their days, maybe 5, maximum 10% are what you would call or label a political junkie that would even show up to an event like this. So it's almost like the Star Trek convention for politics, whether it be liberal or Democrat. That's that segment of the population that's so into something turned out for these things.
Wow. So what do you find? And I was watching the news last night, and it's really amazing. It really is. I'm swapping around. I'm watching MSNBC, and it was like, okay. Then I went over to Fox, and it was like, well, is this the same stuff? I mean, it was like, it's amazing how the cuts are done, X, and the way they do things. And I certainly want to touch on Jeb Bush here a little bit, which I've had for the last couple of weeks. Roger Stone did a piece on that a while back. And for those who don't know Roger Stone, he was with the Nixon administration. We'll get into this a little bit. But certainly he wrote a piece on Bush. But it seems as though that there wasn't a whole bunch of it didn't seem as though there wasn't a whole bunch of tension. Even with Rand Paul, I didn't see all that much with Rand. I certainly didn't see Gary Johnson down there. Was Gary down there? I think wasn't he there?
Gary was doing a speech or on a panel debating about the merits of decriminalization of marijuana.
Yeah, and I know MSNBC had some stuff on it, but it's just amazing that, one of the things that jumped out at me watching Hannity last night, killed me, was it just seemed as though that CPAC, if you weren't a Republican, you weren't on the news, and I know, having been to CPAC before, you certainly have a very good portion of younger folks down there. I don't know if it's the same this year, but they really identify themselves as libertarians. Certainly they're there to support Rand Paul, who's a Republican, which is all cool. But at the end of the day, you would think that the only people that were at CPAC were the Jeb Bushes and, the Rubios of the world.
Well, I think the overall conclusion that you can get right now is when each of these people go on stage, the number one tactic they use to gain and garner support for most of them has to do with the manipulation of fear. It's convincing a woman in the middle of Kansas that she has to worry about ISIS. And she will give up her vote because of this irrational fear in many ways. And so, consumer companies do the same thing, when they tell you about, what brand of soap do you use, and it has to kill germs. And, even though every soap kills germs, they still want to make it seem like one germ, soap kills more germs than the other. It has to do with fear. So what was common amongst all of the candidates that were speaking is almost all of them are in favor of bombing somebody. It just comes down to the degree to which they're going to go bomb somebody in another country. And how far? There isn't a single, it's not a completely isolationist, non-interventionist, type of mindset that's over there. That's what gets always bantered about. And the Fox Newses of the world, they're supportive of this because, grandstanding talk is just famous. It's kind of like most liberals that you see when they're on TV. They never have enough money. Who's going to give away the most money to the poor? It's not a question. Not a question of who, is even debating the merits of the program itself. Is this an effective program at making this social change they always talk about? It's like, well, I'm going to give away $1 billion. No, I'll give away $2 billion. It's the devil's in the details, never explaining that. But, to your earlier point that you were mentioning about 9/11, and this kind of goes back to a lot of this. The fact of the matter is the people that ran the 9/11 Commission have actually publicly stated that they did not get the full story. They were not able to interview all the witnesses that they want. They could not make all of them talk under
oath.
Under oath. I mean, how crazy is this? The U.S. goes to war for 14 plus years, spends over $1 trillion, possibly $2 trillion of future liabilities, and we still don't know all of the details to that. But we're supposed to trust that we got all the details with the invasion of Syria, which seems to have morphed into ISIS, but we seem to know everything about ISIS to go back. And it's just amazing how the media puts the ring through the cow's nose, and then the politicians grab the ring and pull the cow around, and the cow's the public.
Well, certainly, as I said yesterday, watching the news yesterday and watching Fox, it seemed as though they were really pushing Walker. Actually, more so Bush than anybody. Bush, then Rubio, and then Walker, and those are the three. And obviously, if I had to put any kind of faith in any of them, I would certainly be leaning towards Walker, and we talked about that a while back. But, I wanted to put our spin on this a little bit, too, because right after Romney stepped out, Roger Stone, who I've known, stayed at his house, and has been a veteran Republican strategist. CBS News described him as that, and the Daily Beast described him as the self-admitted hitman for the GOP, known for a lot of his dirty tricks. In fact, I wrote one of the things down that he talks about. He says, I remember going through the cafeteria when he was young and telling every kid that Nixon was in favor of school on Saturdays. He said, that was my first political trick. But it went on a little farther. It says, with Mitt Romney out, former Governor Jeb Bush is the new front runner for the 2016 Republican presidential nomination that he tries for his third restoration of the House of Bush. Although his Florida backers assure us he governed as a conservative, Jeb has warned us that, like his brother George W. Bush, he would be a big government Republican. Jeb Bush said the president, he would most, I found this to be quite alarming there, Michael. Jeb Bush said that the president he would most emulate is not his father, Bush 41, or Ronald Reagan, but big government himself, Lyndon Baines Johnson, the Texan down there, Michael. According to the Miami Herald, in February of 2013, Jeb Bush told several hundred people at the St. Leo University that were he to become president, he would strive to be like LBJ, putting aside LBJ's lies to the American people about what was really happening in Vietnam and the first government raid on the Social Security Trust Fund, which was the first steps toward the massive federal debt of today. LBJ's expansion of the welfare state under his Great Society program started the entitlements bankrupting us today. Bush praised LBJ's strong practical leadership and is this Jeb Bush's role model. So, go ahead. Who's jumping in?
Well, Lou, actually, probably Jeb Bush was the first honest statement he's ever made. because at least exposes us to what he believed in. And you're right. LBJ was, even here in Texas, there's nobody backing LBJ because they know what he was. They know he was corrupt. And this is what Jeb Bush emulates. I mean, this certainly really supports my decision on not Jeb Bush.
Yeah, and go ahead, X. I know you were jumping in there.
Yeah, let's all remember Lyndon Johnson was called Landslide Lindy, okay, because he is famous for vote rigging. He is the original, most famous vote rigger, most blatant, because when he won his Senate seat, I think it was his first term. I forget the actual year it was. But everybody could look this up. Okay, now, of course, this gets left out of the history books. Why did they call him this? Because mysteriously they found, one town, the precinct.
Down by you, Michael. Johnson. Isn't Johnsonville or Johnsontown right by you, Michael?
Didn't he write the training manual for the Wilkes-Barre or for the Luzerne County Voter Services Department?
Could have done that, too.
It's Johnson City.
Johnson City. You're right around Johnson City. I remember.
And here's the interesting part. Everywhere in Texas, things are growing, except in Johnson City. It's on one of the busiest thoroughfares going through this part of Texas, and nothing's happening. And he's just left the legacy of corruption. And this is why nothing grows in Johnson City.
X, go ahead. I'm sorry. I cut you off there a little bit.
No, I mean, it's just, again, this is the hard part of why, and this is one of the great things about alternative media. We now have the ability to go back and access information that we couldn't do before. So I'm mentioning the word Landslide Lyndon. You now have the ability to Google that. See, I just said it on the air. Anybody listening can go look it up. They can put a link on it and go, holy moly, what they were talking about is true. President Johnson is famous for vote rigging. Okay? So when people go, oh, there's no voter fraud or anything like that, what are you talking about?
Voter fraud.
Let's talk about, John F. Kennedy's dad, with the illegal votes, during Nixon Kennedy, that came out of, I believe it was West Virginia and
Chicago.
Right. So, this whole idea, what both parties do, though, is they create a myth or about what the true situation is, because it placates the public. It makes the public believe in the system. It makes the public believe in that our elected officials are a group of honest people that would never distort truths and so forth. This big one this past week was they were talking about, over 50. They said 50% of Republican primary voters that just voted believe that Barack Obama is Muslim or Muslim-leaning in his ideas. But they forgot to tell you that over 55% of the Democrats don't believe he's a Christian. So they're trying to say, it's just only the Republicans that think this way about Obama, and they're leaving out the fact that even though Obama has said he's a Christian, 55% of the population of the Democratic Party don't believe him. So, when you get these, and this is why we're always talking about polls are fantastic because you just pick out the one item in the poll of 50 or 60 questions that serves to kind of support a point, but you're leaving out the counterpoints to it. And that's why we really do need to get our All-in-American God We Trust poll up and going so we can expose this.
The polls are meant to deceive. But I agree with you there, X. Okay, listen, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we got Kerry Schimmelfig. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the stuff they're doing with the veterans, the NEPA Alliance, and you listen to Sanity Check on 94.3 FM, The Talker.
As we roll down this unfamiliar road, and although this wave is stringing us along, just know you're not alone, 'cause I'm gonna make this place your home.
That's it. You're home. 94.3 FM, The Talker, Sanity Check. Libertarian Lou and Tea Party Mike, and we got X, and we got Frank, and Kerry Schimmelfinnig. We got it right, Frank?
How about that?
I'm taking a beating here.
Well, Lou, come on. If you can't even get a name right,
can they believe what they say?
That's right. Don't listen to Lou ever. That's just your new motto out there.
But we say that all the time.
No, you say don't listen to a word we say, implying that they shouldn't listen to any of us. I'm telling them flat out, don't listen to you.
How you like that, Michael? You see this? Nothing like taking a beating.
I guess there's no endorsement from the Gazette coming in right now.
That's right. Yeah, we're going to have to...
Hello, Times Leader, did you hear that one?
We're going to have to definitely reconsider here. Last week we talked a little bit about, remember the lottery and winning the life lottery, and I talked a little bit about certainly the whole idea of your whole life being on hold. And Ben, if you're out there, I want to give you a number if you have a pen. Just give me a call, because I do want to write that article. And you brought up about the whole college at that time, and it was a piece that I totally forgot about. But and anybody want to get a hold of us at the Independent Gazette, the number is 266-8086. So just give us a call. That number is 266-8086, and I would like to pick your brain a little bit more about that. You certainly remembered what was going on back then, and Michael, really, you think about it, the numbers were being pulled out of a fishbowl, and your whole life was Kerry. Your whole life was on hold. I mean, it was really kind of amazing. I mean, and how it changed things. I mean, for so many individuals.
It's funny. Last 2 weeks ago when I was here, and we were talking after
the show. That's right. Yeah.
And you made a great statement, which it really resonated with me. And I was talking to a couple of members in the organization and other veterans that I talk to on a regular basis, and you made a statement of how it was a lottery of life, and what you meant by that statement was some of your friends that got the numbers, and clearly we're talking about the draft during Vietnam, but some of your friends that numbers were picked that got drafted, excuse me, please, never came back.
Yeah.
And I said, I never heard anybody really put it that way, and it's a great statement.
And then Ben had called in one of our regular listens here yesterday, and part of it was that I was classified A1, okay, which I was ready to go. So I mean, regardless, I had to show up. But one of the other things, and maybe if you didn't hear the show last week, Kerry, was that, once those numbers were picked, you were going to go. So then, but if you went into different services, a lot of folks registered for the Air Force or went into the Navy, because otherwise, when you were drafted, you were going to the front lines. You didn't have an option. So, and Ben had brought up the fact that it wasn't as easy just getting into college these days. And I kind of remember that. I mean, it wasn't like, oh, okay, I'm off to college. Well, Michael, you actually had to pay for college back then. So it wasn't.
Wow.
So you weren't just off and running. So anyway, we have Kerry. Kerry stopped in today because we're doing a couple things. Go ahead, Kerry.
Well, with that being said, it's a great way for us, too, to segue into our Veteran of the Month, to let people know what we're doing with that program so they understand. What we're doing is recognizing a veteran, a veteran's family, or someone who's been through that can tell their story. Because it's amazing how, like you had brought up, some friends that went that never came back.
Yeah.
They're the stories we want to hear about.
Or came back damaged.
I mean, and we see that now with the more active and more recent wars, I guess is a bad word. Or disagreements, I guess we want to call them. But my point being is that's what we're resonating to the community, and that's what we want to make people aware of. And I'm going to go right into the whole NEPA VEMA and what we're about.
Yeah.
There's a lot of great organizations out there, don't get me wrong, but one of the things that we've done is we've become an organization where we try to help veterans where they don't have the ability or time to survive to get through the red tape. In other words, we have, and we get a lot of calls from either local community groups or the VA Hospital Direct or organizations or local VA centers with veterans that are waiting that just came back. And you know what? A veteran's got a job. He got back. He just got back. He got a job. And he doesn't have enough money to get transportation yet, and he's waiting to get his paperwork processed. And, so he needs a bus ticket for a month to get to a job where he got a $20 an hour job. So it's not like these organizations are all, or ours is out there just handing out money to veterans and saying, sit home, don't do anything. We get a lot of them that are just need a little help. We have one that we had to help, and we recognize we had to help a family member where a husband and a wife got a new job. They were living with family to get back on their feet, and they just needed to get
and the car broke
down. Car broke down, and they couldn't get to work. So, and you know what? They had no place to go.
Right.
There's no organizations out there now. Now here was a family putting themselves back on the track. So I think a lot of people get, because I'll hear a lot of people say, "Oh, the veterans," but I think they miss, some of the points of some of the organizations out there.
Well, and certainly we have some events coming up with the whole Vet of the Month too. And I want to throw this out because it's important. This month in the Quad, our newspaper up in Wyoming County and Bradford and Susquehanna. The Vet of the Month is sponsored by Gage True Value Hardware, your hometown hardware store, and that I think that's important to throw that out there. And certainly one of the things is they have the boxes there. I told you, Kerry,
about the flags.
I'm not originally from this area, so going in there, what did I say? Walking in there, I felt like I was in South Dakota, Michael. I mean, it was really pretty cool, and they have the mailbox there for for worn American flags and stuff like that. So I did want to throw that out there.
Great company, great local community-based company. Have always been very supportive of the community, and there's a lot of them. It's funny. Our phones, we're ringing off the hook, and yours, and of companies and people that want to step up and give to the article, people that want to support it because they realize what it's about. It's about recognizing, and the key to this stuff too, as well as we said this, any revenues we do or everything, we're keeping this local. Northeastern Pennsylvania, there's a lot of national and federal organizations out there that are great. We don't by any way, shape, or form degrade them. But we feel that this is important for our local community, and that's why we did this, and that's kind of why we got together, and you guys stepped up to the plate as giving us a venue to help us to recognize the organization and grow this whole program. And
certainly we have something coming up May 2nd to 6th, and we'll keep pushing that out. Also, you have the bowling for veterans and every pin, right?
Right. The way it's going to work is a percentage of the proceeds go to the organization. I'm not quite sure whether it's a penny or 2 cents or whatever the percentages are. We're still working out that detail, but the Stanton and the bowling alley stepped up. They called us and said, look, we wanted to help locally. We wanted to keep it local. That was the stipulation.
Right.
All the revenues had to stay local. Anything that we're working on, we've got a couple of things coming up. And this is a great opportunity for companies as well to come in and say, a game to bowl is
$3, right? Or $3.50, whatever it is. And I wanted to touch on that also.
And a company to come in and say, you know what, we want to give to the organization. We're a nonprofit registered charity. They can get a tax benefit, so to speak.
We'll sponsor a family.
Or sponsor, and that's our goal.
$50 or whatever it is. Right?
And a whole family could come in, a veteran family that, needs a day, to get out of the stresses of life and whatever the case may be, or whatever they may be dealing. We're all dealing with different things inside our four walls in every home. So
I'm actually looking forward to this. I haven't bowled in years.
Well, we're getting a lot. It's been great. And the lanes have been, Stanton and Idle Hours have stepped up, and those people, Tom and the crew have really, they've just, and Kerry Carney's been our kind of our media point on this, and he's been great on it, and the whole board is excited about it. And this is just one of the things. I mean, we've got a couple other things. That
and Kerry's part with Marty Wolf, who follows us here on the radio.
Marty
a lot,
and
I think David. There's a number of different.
It's just amazing how the community outreach on this has been great because, again, a couple of the things were important. Number one, the way the group is facilitating the help. I mean, not only do we do just, write a check for a problem, we also help veterans that call that are confused and need help and direction and information. I mean, so it's just been a great opportunity. And this organizations like this fundraiser is awesome.
Hey, one of the things, Michael, I want to throw this out to you, and certainly to you too, Kerry. We go to print on Monday for the Carbon County Independent Gazette, and I got some information. The folks down in Carbon County is writing an article, and certainly doing some research, and there's some additional research that needs to be done. And once again, if anybody has any kind of information on this, we would sure like to know. But the veteran hospital chapels were ordered by the federal government and the Obama administration to cover or remove all Christian and Jewish imagery from the chapels. Specifically, they are to remove any religious imagery or artifacts that do not predate a 1945 date. And so some of the things that we're looking at is when does the separation of church and state go too far? Will every picture of a star, a cross, a book, a tablet, a tree symbol be considered for removal? Michael, I mean, what do you have any thoughts on this? Or Kerry, I mean, certainly, I mean, it seems a little overboard at this particular point in time.
What's the purpose of a chapel?
What you would think, Frank? I mean, really.
I mean, seriously, get rid of it. If that's where we're headed with this, the purpose of a chapel, I would think, would be to pray, and to pray would be to exercise your religious belief, whatever that may be, and to remove all religious artifacts
before after 1945. So I don't know, but nonetheless, this is once again, it seems as though that
it circles back to your critical thinking.
Critical thinking.
I mean, people and how you choose to have a relationship with any supreme being or whatever way you want to look at it. I think people, the bottom line is when I went into the military, I gave them an open book. I said, here you go. My deal was I put my life on the line to do what my responsibility was. And if that was that you want to practice Judaism and you want to practice Buddhism and you want to practice, that's fine. I that wasn't what I was there for. I was there to protect my country, my family, to have the ability to do that. And I think that's where sometimes that gets clouded. And again, you go back to that critical thinking,
Well, evidently they Michael, they went down. They've taken pictures. Met with folks, the Veteran Hospital in Philadelphia, and this is going on. And so, if anybody has any information, please contact us because we'll be writing on this. Go ahead.
I will say at this point that I think that's an important part of the hospital for them to focus on because the rest of it runs so smoothly.
Right. Okay.
That was a joke.
Yeah, it wasn't.
I can't get the Veteran Administration figured out.
So, Michael, what I mean, this seems like once again a little overboard here, right?
Well, I'm just thinking as you guys are talking about it, and it seems to me not just on the surface, it seems like it's going into our rights to do whatever religion we choose, but deep down, I think it's a real attempt to change our culture, Lou. As much as so many try to say that many of our founders weren't religiously Christian-based is nothing more than a lie, Lou. And I think so much of our culture is based on Judeo-Christian values. So I think that's something we need to look at, too.
Well, we'll certainly be writing about this this week, and you'll be hearing more about it. And I'm sure as, once again, this is brought to light, then other news media might be picking this up. We're going to take a break for our last final segment. You listen to Sanity Check on 94.3 FM The Talker.
4.3 FM The Talker.
Like a storm growing across the horizon, there's a reckoning coming like Judgment Day. Finally we've been awakened from this nightmare. Voice upon voice, like a crashing wave. Can you hear us now?
Can you hear us now?
They're hearing us now.
They're starting to hear us?
Yeah.
You think, is Wilkes-Barre going to be awakened from that nightmare? When you're saying, Frank, that just might be happening.
I believe it's happening, Lou. I believe Wilkes-Barre's prayers are about to be answered.
You're hearing it first here on Sanity Check. Everybody will be calling later on because giving you a buzz. What are you talking about?
What's going on?
What's going on?
There they are.
Really can't. We're already they're already checking in. We have some phone problems here today, but that's okay. If you've been trying to call, try now. Give us a buzz, even though that we're getting down towards the end of the show. But Frank, one of the things that certainly we started touching on before is these foreclosures, these homes, what's going on, and we spoke a little bit about. I certainly brought it up. I'm certainly an advocate for more taxes, but if it came down to owning your own home, finally getting rid of property tax, because property rights is so important.
Well, that's probably the largest issue. I've said this many times. That's probably the largest issue facing Pennsylvanians today is our runaway property taxes. It's the one thing that people work their entire life for, is the American dream, the dream of home ownership.
And not being worried about being thrown out or renting from the government.
Exactly. It's just basic math that the older you get, the less income you have available to you. As those folks, our parents and grandparents, move into retirement, we're seeing that they have less and less disposable income than they had before. Obviously, they're not working. They're living on social insecurity. And maybe partly it is their fault. They didn't plan well. But whatever the case may be, they're here now. They've worked their whole lives struggling, scrimping, and saving for that house that the government's pulling right out from under them.
And one of the things, Michael, I thrown out there was that it was the whole thing about, certainly it's been bantered about that maybe raising the sales tax. And I said, well, okay, that's fine. Raise at least you could control that. If you have to buy less, do whatever. But I had mentioned
it's a voluntary tax.
It's a voluntary
sales
tax. Yeah.
Right. So I've advocated, as you know, for House Bill, Senate Bill 76 many times. And our newly elected governor has said if that bill does reach his desk, he would veto it. But on Friday, he released a plan with striking similarities. He wants to increase the sales tax, increase the earned income tax in the state, and he
with
a promise that he will lower property taxes, not eliminate them as House Bill, Senate Bill 76 states that they should eliminate them. He wants to promise to lower them. Now, anytime a politician wants to do anything, they seem to promise property tax relief. We've heard that with the casinos, and we all know that we're receiving boatloads of cash from the casinos, and none of us have to pay any property taxes now, right? I'm right on that.
Michael, what do you think about that? Have you heard those promises before? Do we got Michael?
No, Michael hung up when he heard property taxes.
What happened to Michael?
He said, well, I'm down here in Texas. What do I care?
And one of the reasons why,
is runaway property tax.
What happened with Mike, and certainly I was there when he warned Luzerne County Council, and he says, listen, if we continue to go down this route, certainly I'm going to pack up and go. And
he followed through with his threat.
And well, once again, though, Frank, certainly what happens with all of this stuff, and we've seen it, people will move.
They have no choice.
They have no choice.
I've invested in my home in South Wilkes-Barre. I've invested my time, my money, my everything, and it's getting to the point now where, because of the taxes, because of a lot of things in the area, I can't sell my home for what I even have into it. So I'm looking at, okay, if I take a loss and get rid of the house, then what? So ultimately, I hear the same sentiments. Don't move, improve. Well, the only way we can improve is to elect people who are going to do what needs to be done. We saw that in the Aaron Coffer race. Aaron was a strong supporter of House Bill 76, right, and Aaron was elected based on pretty much that campaign promise alone, and he followed through. Immediately got to Harrisburg, co-sponsored the bill, and is doing everything he can to move it forward. However, there are those out there, the wolves of the world, who say absolutely not.
Well, let me ask you this question. You have a little better handle on the pulse of what's going on there with this particular bill. Does this have a shot?
It definitely does. The votes are there to pass the Senate right now. So when this comes out onto the Senate floor, it will pass, and it will move over to the House. Now, there are those that will say, well, it'll fail in the House. It's one thing to say right now that I'm not going to vote for this, or I'm not going to co-sponsor the bill while it's not on your desk. But when it passes the Senate and all of the public pressure is turned to the House, are they going to be able to say no? I suspect not. I suspect they will pass it in the House as well. And then it comes down to Wolf. You're proposing a plan that's very similar to the bill that's now on your desk. Are you really going to veto the bill that's almost mirroring the plan that you're suggesting? The only difference is it doesn't make a false promise. It actually carries through. So if you really want what you say you want, go ahead and sign that, Governor.
We got Kurt on line one. Good morning, Kurt. I was wondering if you were listening this morning. If you heard earlier, I was speaking very highly of you, and certainly the conversations that we have. That whole critical thinking is a suspension of judgment. I think that's pretty telling right there. So, how you doing this morning?
Oh, good, Lou. Thanks. I've been listening since the beginning. Love you guys' show. There's another. That's just one of the components. Intellectual courage. Analyzing assumptions. I'm working on something called the Common Sense Revival. We're promoting critical thinking and positive psychology so people can get their heads screwed on straight and be positive as we head off into this encircling tyranny. I just want to quickly mention 50 Experts Speak Out. That is the movie that Richard Gage produced about 9/11, and that has 50 different architects and engineers that discussing the facts and science based around 9/11. And Building 7 is not in the official report. So anybody who's thinking we're talking crazy stuff, recognize that for some reason Building 7 is not in the official report, and we should then go and do our research because of that fact.
Kurt, our time is short, but I do want to touch on something else that you had brought up through our conversation. And I actually mentioned this to a few other folks. You hear the term waking up. And we talked about that, and as folks wake up, it becomes scary and actually depressed. And I think, or many get depressed, and I'm thinking that's one of the reasons why you see so many people maybe tuning out, and we see that happening as folks maybe open up and start allowing themselves to have some of this critical thinking, that it then becomes scary, and then they throw their hands up in the air, and we have to be able to have solutions to what is going on, Kurt, correct?
Yeah, I think that's why, again, I'm promoting positive psychology, which are strategies to rally yourself in the face of what looks like, it is a terrible shock. If you think that 9/11, or you start to understand 9/11 is a big lie, as are all these wars, you're going to become horribly depressed. So don't worry about it. You'll move through it. And we
don't worry about it.
With reality. So.
They're lying to you. Have no fear, folks.
Have no fear. Don't believe a word we say. Kurt, on that note, we got to go. We're getting right down to the last few minutes, but thanks for calling in. There you go. I couldn't have said it better. Michael, I don't know who we still have online. Do we have Michael? Do we have X? Who do we got?
You got X.
Oh, sorry, X. We lost Michael somewhere along the way, but nonetheless, we're down to the last couple seconds. Any last words of wisdom, Mr. X?
Yeah, just you guys are going to do the 9/11 thing, and the general consensus has been just always remember it's not that there's some massive conspiracy as much as the fact that gross incompetence has always been covered up.
There you go. So on behalf of Mike, and we say this each week, God bless everybody, and we'll be back next week with Sanity Check on 94.3 FM The Talk. Have a great weekend.